Mr. Ott, would you please stand? Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Please state and spell your name for the record and provide a business address.
My name is Gabriel Ahn. Last name is A-H-N, and my business address is 2244 Walnut Grove Avenue, Rosemead, California, 91770.
Mr. Weissman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Ahn. Welcome.
Good morning.
I would ask you to have before you 3 exhibits. First of all, Exhibit 2. Do you have that?
I do.
And directing your attention to question 22 that runs from page 28 through page 35. Do you have that?
Yes, I do.
Next, I would ask you to put before you what's been marked for identification as Exhibit 29. Do you have that? And
Yes.
for identification purposes, Your Honor, Exhibit 29 is a portion of, Appendix 1 to SCE 2 and 3. And specifically, the portion that we're interested in this morning is tab 22. Do you have that?
Yes, I do.
These are the audit reports that are summarized in the portion of Exhibit 2 that we have previously noted on the record, correct?
Yes.
And finally, I'd ask you to take a look at Exhibit 12, which is your witness qualifications, correct?
I don't have those in front of me.
Okay.
Okay. I have them.
Great. Now, this testimony that we've just identified, I know you were not the original witness on this, are you adopting these portions of the testimony as your own?
I am.
Insofar as you've done so, is the testimony true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Your Honor, the witness is available for cross-examination.
Okay. Mr. Ahn, in your testimony in SCE 02, adopted testimony, page 34, on line 14 and following, it describes the song's workplace safety inspection process and refers to a report issued on September 27, 2012. Are you familiar with that report?
Yes, I am.
Could you please describe what the scope of that audit was?
The scope of the specific audit is outlined in detail on the audit report, which is contained in the exhibit, but my general understanding of the scope was to review the song's workplace inspection process and program at the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station.
Okay. And was that a completely internal review?
Yes, it was.
And did the report identify any weaknesses?
I believe there were 4 observations that were contained in the report.
Could you describe those, please?
If I may ask a clarifying question, do you just want the observation or the corrective actions, or?
Well, I'll take them a step at a time.
Okay.
I want to make sure I understand what the focus of these points are.
Understood.
Okay. Or
Okay.
is.
So, the first observation, which is on page 4 of that audit report.
Can you direct us to, this is in Edison 29, tab 22, and what page? It's actually towards the back. I'm not sure there's an actual page.
Yeah, there is an actual page.
let's go off the record for a moment, make sure everyone's there. Mr. On?
Okay. So the first observation is contained on page 4 of the audit report. The project identification number is Y1252003, and that's the Audit Services Department's identification number. So the first observation condition, there's 2 parts in observation 1. The first condition or weakness being that workplace safety inspections weren't conducted conducted and documented on a consistent basis in compliance with the SONG's workplace safety inspection procedure. The second item has to do with the records weren't contained in a central repository, the records being the inspection reports that were conducted on San Onofre.
Okay, I'd like to ask a follow-up question on that. In that first section, it says that some of the causation of this weakness is fluctuations in personnel assignments and work location reconfiguration. Can you tell me, is that what that means? Is it related to the reshifting of personnel due to the outages?
This audit report I did not personally prepare this audit report, but I'll speak to my general knowledge of this report.
Okay.
Individuals, depending on their job assignments in San Onofre, are transferred. So my understanding of this observation was that based on their responsibilities in various positions, if an individual was responsible for conducting the workplace safety inspection, if he moved to another position where he was not responsible for that task or duty, then I'm not aware of there being a mechanism to confirm that someone had taken over his place to do the inspection reports and document them.
And have any steps been taken to correct that?
Well, part of the issue was that SONGS has gone through, and I believe is still currently going through their business transformation, which is their reduction in force. So I can't say what specific actions were done, but Audit Services has a mechanism to track this observation and to close this observation, and my understanding is this observation has been closed.
Okay, you said that, and we're talking about September 27th and afterwards, you said that there had, this is because there'd been reductions in workforce. My recollection of the testimony is that reductions in the workforce did not begin until December. Is that your understanding?
My understanding was the reductions in force occurred in 2012. I can't provide a specific time period in 2012 or when they began.
Okay. All right. Could you continue your description of the control weaknesses identified?
I am on audit observation. The weakness identified was that the SONG safety inspection checklist used by managers and supervisors to document workplace safety inspections were not comprehensive enough to identify specific safety concerns. My understanding of this observation was that the inspection checklists used were more for housekeeping items and not directed towards safety-related issues.
No, I believe that it says that it doesn't identify specific machine and safety standards. Is that referring to equipment that is inside the reactor space? Is this or outside the reactor and in other parts of the plant? Do you know, or both?
The report didn't specify whether the inspections were done in the plant side or in the protected area of San Onofre, so my assumption is it's for San Onofre as a whole.
Okay. And it says that, as I understand what your testimony, you're saying that the control weakness was that the checklist was inadequate or incomplete in some way to document monthly safety inspections. Would the monthly safety inspections have changed once the Unit 2 and Unit 3 or Unit 3 were taken offline?
I'm not aware of the inspections being changed because of the units being offline. I believe the inspections were conducted based on the song's procedures, and unless the procedures were updated, I'm not aware of any changes being made.
Okay. All right. And then could you just identify the other control weaknesses, please?
Audit observation number 3, which begins on page 8 of the audit report, has two parts. The first part being that the song's Occupational Safety and Health Organization has created a metrics for industrial safety. However, this metrics does not indicate a goal for the total number of monthly inspections to be conducted. The second part of the observation is that divisional safety committees and councils have not established the metrics for workplace safety inspections.
Has Edison responded to that?
I believe they have the leading industrial safety metrics now contains a goal and is color-coded to identify songs' performance as it relates to industrial safety. And the safety committees and councils have done a communication or communicated it to the site of the importance of conducting industrial safety and inspections.
Okay, and the last control weakness, could you please describe that?
I'm on observation 4, which begins on page 10 of the audit report. That too had two parts to it. The first part being that the area owner assignment matrix on the songs portal does not match the matrix shown on the attachment 7 of the site housekeeping inspection procedure.
Can you translate that to some normal language for people like me? What's happening here?
So the site housekeeping procedure had a matrix contained in attachment 7.
A matrix of scheduling of what?
Of people, the area owner's responsibilities with respect to the workplace safety inspections. And apparently attachment 7 was only for illustrative purposes. It was to be used as a guide to develop, I guess, site-specific matrix. So the matrix, they put that same matrix on the songs portal, which is the internal SCE portal, and they didn't identify it as the matrix being just for illustrative purposes. So San Onofre didn't apparently update the portal to a site-specific item.
Okay. So I'd like to go back to the first item. And this relates to the inconsistent inspections and documentation. In 2012, when Edison received this internal audit report, did it review the recommendations?
The recommendations that...
On addressing that first control weakness.
Do you mean the response that San Onofre provided to us? That's contained in the observation?
Yes, you could. Well, there are recommendations on page 5.
Right. So the 3 recommendations are recommendations made by audit services with regards to observation 1.
And there were 3 recommendations. Could you describe those?
The first one was that the Occupational Safety and Health Department that San Onofre should establish a central repository for retaining and evaluating workplace safety inspection documentation. Recommendation 2 was that the Occupational Safety and Health Department should more effectively communicate the requirements for submitting the inspection documentation to Occupational Safety and Health that are completed. Recommendation 3 was that line managers and supervisors who are responsible for conducting these inspections submit their documentation and be held accountable by the Divisional Safety Council committees.
Okay, so let's look at those one at a time. In the first one, it recommends that the Occupational Safety and Health Department establish a central repository for keeping these workplace inspection documents.
Yes.
In 2012, did Edison do that?
They did create a central repository for the inspection reports. The observation was closed on January 15, 2013, so my assumption is that it was completed in 2012.
And do you have any idea what kinds of resources were required in order to do that?
I don't know what resources were used to create that central repository, but I have confirmation that a central repository was established.
And it's an electronic repository?
Correct.
Okay. So the second one, that the department should more effectively communicate what inspection documentation should be coming in when these inspections are completed. During 2012, did Edison take any steps to respond to that recommendation?
There was as indicated on the client response on October 2012, there was a site-wide stand-up meeting where SONGS reinforced the expectation that these inspection reports be conducted. That's the first bullet point in the client response.
Do you know whether... So that's the only activity in 2012 that you're aware of that's responsive to that recommendation?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And then the last recommendation, that the line managers and supervisors who are responsible for conducting these inspections and submitting documentation should be held accountable, it says, by the divisional safety committees. What is that? How does SCE understand that recommendation as it relates to being held accountable?
I'm not sure if I'm the most knowledgeable person to respond to that question.
Do you have any personal knowledge about Edison's response in 2012 to recommendation 3?
In regards to recommendation 3, my understanding was that SONGS management did a communication to the site to reinforce the need and the requirement to conduct these workplace safety inspections.
What does that mean, did a communication?
There was what they call a SONGS broadcast, similar to an email or like San Onofre has daily plant briefs where they have topics of discussion, and the SONGS broadcasts would be either an email or a part of, say, a daily brief.
Okay. To your knowledge, does the company ever test, when it does these SONGS-wide briefings, does it ever test to see how much got through, was retained by SONGS employees?
I'm not aware of any mechanism for that.
All right. Are you aware that in the general rate case, since 2012 general rate case, that there were O&M requests for safety programs that related to training, equipment upgrades, and other safety-related matters. Are you aware of that?
No, I am not.
So you're an audit person? Is that what? Or a safety person?
My professional certification is I'm a certified public accountant. The individual who conducted the SONGS workplace safety inspection, that specific auditor is no longer with Southern California Edison, but he had the professional certification as a CSP, a certified safety professional.
So I apologize, I missed your qualifications. What is your position now over audits?
I'm a auditor in the operational audit and consulting group. The individual who performed the workplace safety inspection is also within my operational audits group.
Okay. Other than this audit, which I saw in the testimony brought forward by Edison, were there any other safety-related inspection or audits that occurred in 2012 that you're aware of?
Safety-related, I'm not aware of in 2012.
I'm sorry, the answer was no?
No, I'm not aware of any additional safety audits being conducted by audit services.
Okay. In 2012, scratch that. Okay, I think that's all I have. Mr. Weissman, did you have any?
Can I ask a quick clarifying
Judge
question?
Dudney.
Yes.
Mr. Ahn, in all four of the observations here, there's a section titled Regulation/Policy/Procedure Reference Criteria.
Yes.
I'm asking, could you clarify a little bit what those policies are, or where those have form SO123-
Yes.
You're on page 10 or each section?
each of them,
Okay.
beginning on page 4.
Okay. So if you look on page 4 of the audit report, which is the first audit observation, the second portion right under observation and recommendation, audit services lists regulation, policy, procedure, reference, criteria, and there's a number of items that begin with SO. Those items are procedures that are specific to San Onofre.
Okay. And is that just an Edison document, or would that be something in, we've talked earlier in the hearings a lot about the tech specs. Is that applicable here, or are these just Edison control processes?
My understanding is these are just SONGS, SCE procedures and processes.
Yeah, so these are not regulations from the NRC or anything like that?
Speak up.
Just to say my question again, these are not regulations from the NRC or any other agency?
They are not the specific regulations, but some of the procedures do cite, say, an NRC item or reference them. But they don't specifically state what, say, an NRC item is. They just reference them as being incorporated into the document.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Your Honor, just wanted to clarify for the record one point. In the course of preparing for this testimony, Mr. Ahn located another report which was not included in the appendix to SCE2 and not described in SCE2. We have circulated that, marked it for identification as SCE28. I don't propose to introduce it, but I just wanted to make sure the record was clear on that particular point.
Let me go off the record for just a moment and look at 28. I think we're going to take another look at that. I mean, for the completeness of the record, it probably ought to be there. It's the troubling part, of course, is that then it may create some questions. All the parties have parties had a chance to look at 28. So let's hold off on 28 till this afternoon before we determine whether that's the exhibit that is marked as SC28 will be admitted or not.
Very good. And Mr. On would be the witness to sponsor.
Okay, so we'll need Mr. On to stick around.
Very good.
Okay, if that's it, Mr. On, thank you. I'm going to allow you to step down, but I'm not going to excuse you yet while we determine what to do about SCE 28.
Understand.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Off the record. Would you please stand and raise your right hand? Mr. Hunt, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. State your name for the record and your business address.
My name is Paul T. Hunt, Jr. My business address is 2244 Walnut Grove Avenue, Rosemead, California, 91770.
All right, Mr. Marshman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Hunt, and welcome.
Good morning.
I'd like you to please have in front of you Exhibit 8, and I will identify within that exhibit the portions that you're sponsoring as Roman 2A6, page 9, line 23, through page 12, line 24.
Yes.
And then also in Exhibit 9, Section 2F, page 12, line 14, through page 13, line 6.
Yes.
As well as your statement of qualifications in the back.
Yes.
These materials that we've just identified, was this testimony prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, it was.
Is it true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, it is.
And do you adopt this testimony as your own?
Yes, I do.
The witness is available for cross-examination, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Hunt.
Good morning, Mr. Friedman.
I'd like to turn your attention to Exhibit SCE 8, page 10. In this section, you address the topic of AFUDC. And in particular, on line 13 of page 10, you state there is no need to prejudge the outcome of this rate making. Do you see that?
Yes.
So are you suggesting that the Commission should address the reasonableness of AFUDC when the capital projects are ultimately placed into service?
Yes, I believe that would be the appropriate time for the Commission to do so.
And does that mean that the Commission would review this issue in Edison's next general rate case?
The Commission might use that venue, or the Commission might use a different venue for that purpose.
What would be the other venue that you're thinking of?
The Commission could conceivably do that as a result of this investigation.
So that would be a Phase 2 issue?
It would be a later phase issue. I'm not sure I could identify the precise phase for you.
And is it your understanding that whether it would be a later phase of this case or Edison's next GRC, that the Commission would have the authority to adjust or disallow AFUDC at that time?
Well, I believe so, but that's probably a legal question you ought to address to my attorney.
Well, you are addressing the topic of AFUDC in your testimony, are you not?
Yes, I am.
And you are asserting that the request or the proposal made by Turn's witness would prejudge an outcome that would otherwise be determined in another proceeding, correct?
Yes, correct.
So are you, I'm unclear whether you're agreeing with me that the Commission has the ability to adjust AFUDC, just you're disagreeing about the appropriate time.
I agree the Commission has the ability to adjust the AFUDC. I'm not completely certain about where it would do that.
Okay.
I'm really giving a layman's interpretation of that.
Are you aware of any examples for Edison or other California utilities where the Commission has disallowed or suspended AFUDC for capital projects that were delayed?
I cannot recall specific cases of that.
You're not asserting in your testimony the commission has never done so, are you?
No, I'm not.
On page 11 of your testimony, lines 9 and 10, you're discussing the relevance of a FERC order that is referenced in footnote 30 of your testimony.
Yes.
And you note that Edison, on line 9, has not suspended substantially all activities related to the construction of songs. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that the FERC precedents apply only in situations where the utility suspends all activities with respect to the entire facility?
Do you need a moment, Dr. Hunt?
The paragraph that is being referenced there really speaks to the issue of suspension in the case of pipeline facilities.
And so what's the relevance of that to the situation at Songs, in your view?
Well, I think the point is that is not relevant to songs for a couple of different couple of reasons that I explained in my testimony. That is, that order is not relevant to songs. That's the point of the testimony.
Okay. You would agree, would you not, that there are a series of specific capital projects at Songs that are currently that have been delayed due to the extended shutdown?
Yes.
And you would agree that those capital projects are not being actively developed at this time?
That's my understanding, yes.
On page 11, again, lines 14 and 15, you state that FERC's order permits AFUDC accrual if the suspension is reasonable under the circumstances.
Yes.
Is it your understanding that it's relevant whether the suspension occurred due to negligence or imprudence by the utility?
I think that would be a factor that the Commission would consider.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hunt. Those are all my questions.
Ms. George?
Hi, Mr. Hunt.
Good morning.
In SEE 9, page 12,
Yes.
at the bottom of the page, in lines 20, the benefit in refunding money to ratepayers reduces the cash available to SCE to fund expenditures in other areas of its business, including capital spending. You would agree, though, that the reverse is true for ratepayers, that they would have more cash to spend in other areas of their businesses or households.
Yes, ratepayers would have more cash.
And so does that mean that SEE's interests and the ratepayers' interests are opposing in that case?
No, I would not take that meaning at all. I'm simply trying to describe here that the alleged benefit that ratepayers receive is offset by reduced expenditures in the utility. So the economic impact, the one mutes the effect of the other.
I'd like to ask you about a data request that we filed. I did not put it in as an exhibit, however, but I'm sure you are familiar with the, after the deregulation, we had a bailout of stranded assets, and the utility was able to collect several $1 billion. I believe it was for the purpose of retiring the debt on songs. Is that true?
I'll object to the form of the question.
What's the matter with
How-
the form
how-
of the question?
Well, it hasn't connected to songs 2 and 3 in 2012. Is there a way you can connect the foundation you're trying to lay to a question that is within the scope of Dr. Hunt's testimony as it relates to the 2012 rate making?
There's an outstanding imbalance because the ratepayers have been, provided cash to Edison, and that was never refunded. And for the purpose of retiring the debt on songs, but I believe you mentioned in your testimony that there is still a debt. Is that so?
Regarding which units? What are you, or, do you
The
understand
nuclear
question?
power plant itself has a debt still attached to it from Mr. Hunt's testimony. I don't have
Let's
it.
go, take a moment off the record.
Let's stay off the record for a minute.
And restate that. Confirm with Ms. George that that's the data request that she's asking about.
So, Ms. George, you are referring to data request WEMSCE 001, question number 1?
Yes, that's right.
And the response to that question indicates generally SCE does not finance its assets on a project-specific basis. Instead, all of SCE's long-term debt finances all of SCE's assets with some exceptions. And I referenced debt financing fuel inventories and tax-exempt pollution control bonds that were associated with specific pollution control facilities at songs.
I understand that, but that was only part of the money that was collected, that there was debt on the power plant itself. And
Right.
I'm asking whether that was retired based on the funds that were supplied by
Which plant, Ms. George? I'm confused about
the
your
Songs nuclear power
There
plant.
are 3 separate units and 3 separate bucket of costs going on. Which
I don't know which, because I'm not familiar with the details of the bailout, but I just remember that the ratepayers had to pay many billions of dollars after deregulation for the companies to be
Okay.
able to recover their
All right.
stranded assets, and that was the
what Edison did several years ago relative to the decommissioning of Unit 1, which it sounds like that's what you're talking about.
No, it
is
excuse me.
Is what you're trying to find out is whether Edison is applying similar rate-making approaches in 2012 as it did in earlier years? Is that what you're trying to ask?
No, what I'm trying to ask is whether there's an outstanding imbalance, basically that Edison has collected from ratepayers money that was not used to depreciate this asset as it was expected. I mean, that was the idea, that it would be used to retire the debt on songs, and that was the whole, all of the units, all of the debt on the power plant.
Objection, Your
Ms.
Honor.
George.
Scope.
Pardon me.
Give your counsel time to object.
It's outside the scope of Phase 1.
I can't see that you've linked any relevance to the issues outstanding in Phase 1, partly because you haven't defined the time period, the scope of your question, what it's applicable to, whether it's a rate-making concept or it's an AFUDC concept or what. So the problem is with the question in that it is way too vague to understand what you're trying to get at, which makes it difficult to find any relevance. So I think you need to move on, Ms. George.
Can you tell me, Mr. Hunt, with the CTC charge after deregulation, was that applicable to all of the rate base related to songs?
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of Phase 1.
Are you asking whether there's a CTC charge relating to the songs facility, which is currently in 2012 base O&M rates? Base O&M and the rates or revenue requirement, they're attached to it?
I believe that there is, as the response to our data request indicates, there are some outstanding bonds, but the witness in the data request failed to respond or stated that SCE only, they spread it over an even larger category of costs rather than isolating all of the costs related to the nuclear power plant.
It sounds to me, Ms. George, it's like you're asking questions that are relevant to the cost of capital proceeding.
I thought that there were still costs being collected in this 2012 related to the depreciation of the asset.
Okay, stop there. That's a question.
I'm sorry, repeat that last part again. Were there...
Was the depreciation of the asset, there's still rate recovery for depreciation for songs, any part of songs asset?
Yes, there is depreciation recovery for songs in 2012.
So in other words, the depreciation was not accomplished with the CTC charge, which is what it was meant for, yes?
No, it did not fully, the CTC charge did not result in songs being fully depreciated.
Can I clarify, are we talking about the Songs 1 decommissioned facility or the overall Songs Unit 1, 2, and 3?
The CTC charge, to the extent that it reduced rate base or caused debt to be refunded, applied to all of SCE's generating units, not just songs.
Okay. Thank you. Proceed, Ms. George.
But you are claiming that there is an outstanding amount that's of depreciation on songs. So I'm not clear on how you can say that everything is general on one hand is when it comes in, but when it's, when the company is charging ratepayers, they're charging for songs rate base. Is that right?
Well, let's go back for a minute to the response to question number 1. The response to question number 1 says that SCE does not finance its assets on a project-specific basis, except for the 2 cases identified in question number 1. All of SCE's debt finances all of SCE's assets, and you cannot identify a specific debt issue associated with songs other than the pollution control debt that's identified in the response to question 1. To the extent that you're bringing up the competition transition charge from the restructuring period, the financial transactions that were taken as a result of Edison receiving those revenues were spread across all of SCE's assets, and they were not necessarily applied specifically to songs. There is no remaining CTC balance that I am aware of that represents money collected specifically for songs. To go to a further point, you've been asking why has songs not been fully depreciated. The reason is that after the restructuring period and after the depreciation of songs 2 and 3 sunk that was identified before restructuring, SCE has added additional capital to songs that is not fully depreciated. It's being depreciated over the expected license period for the facility, which ends in 2022.
And would the steam generator project be part of that?
Yes.
So will the steam generator project debt, is that considered directly applicable to songs, or is that considered, is that spread across your entire
There
fleet?
is no steam generator debt specific to that asset. The steam generators are financed along with all of Edison's other assets.
So the financing charges are going to accrue no matter what, in other words? When we do the reasonableness review of the amount of the steam generator costs, there's going to be a large interest charge that is going to accrue whether or not this is reasonable, because you can say it's not specifically related to songs?
Objection, Your Honor. Scope.
I'm going to allow this one question in hopes that it adds clarity to the differences of what's being decided here and there, and I have one clarifying question related to it, so I'll let Dr. Hunt respond.
When the Commission considers the steam generators, the Commission will determine whether a return is to be authorized on the steam generator rate base. If the Commission authorizes a return on the steam generator rate base, that will be money available to pay the bondholders. Southern California Edison will be obligated to pay the bondholders regardless of what the Commission decides on the steam generator return. That is, you have to separate the rate making, which determines whether the company will receive a return in rates, with the obligation to bondholders, which is present regardless of how the Commission treats the steam generators for rate-making purposes.
And that resolved my follow-up question. Okay, let's move on,
Thank
Ms.
you.
George.
I'm done.
Okay. Judge Denny, do you have any questions?
Mr. Hunt, going back to the testimony about AFUDC, which is in SE 8. On page 10, you compare two statements of financial accounting standards, SFAS 34 and 71.
Yes.
As I understand your testimony here, SFAS 71 is what's relevant to public utilities, and SFAS 34 is relevant to other types of companies. Is that correct?
Yes, that is generally correct.
Okay. Is that a typical arrangement, that there are different standards for utilities?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So SFAS 34 is still in effect, just not...
FAS 34 is still in effect, but SFAS 71 governs accounting for rate-regulated enterprises such as an electric utility.
Right. conversation with Mr. Friedman earlier, you talked about when a capital project is suspended. Is there a definition for suspension that you're aware of, relevant here?
I'm not aware of a definition of suspension in the FERC regulations that govern AFUDC. The regulation that governs AFUDC does use the word abandoned, and abandoned has a specific meaning in utility case law, generally designating a project that is under construction that has never been used and useful. But I do not, my understanding is the FERC regulations do not define suspension.
Okay. Thank you. And, I have one quick clarifying question for you on SE9. On page 14 in SE9, under the heading Roman 3A1, the only relevant costs are the incremental costs of research.
Excuse me for interrupting you, Your Honor. I apologize, but just to make the record clear, we did not include this in what we were proposing to introduce because it's responsive to testimony that was stricken.
Right.
Just to have a clear record.
Yes, and that's actually exactly where I was heading, is to make sure that one of the sentences, well,
It's not coming in.
yeah, it's not coming in. I just wanted to confirm that the costs you're talking about here are essentially replacement power costs. That accurate? There's...
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's good enough. Thank you.
Okay, I have just a couple of questions. Do you have any information, have you reviewed the warranty contract between Edison and MHI?
No.
Do you have any involvement in the insurance claims?
No.
Do you have any information about avoided costs during 2012?
No.
And do you have any information about the tax consequences Edison will have in 2012 as a result of the outages?
No.
Okay. All right. Mr. Weissman?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Hunt. You're excused.
Thank you.
Let's take we're doing pretty well. Let's take a 15-minute break, come back at 11. And I think that brings us to Mr. Warden. It's not? Okay. Off the record.